As we edge closer and closer to this upcoming season, we have to dig through a lot of things that the Chicago Bulls have to correct. But I want to point the attention to two of our young guys. That's Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips. Is it now a never time for these two young players? And then Billy Donovan is ranked low in the NBA coaches polls, according to CBS. Y'all know we're going to talk about it, break it all down, but you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Bulls podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. If you're tuned in with me today, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, Joe Cowley came out and listed Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips as some of the "it's now a never time" players in one of his most recent articles that I thought was very, very interesting. When it came to Joe Cowley, he mentioned that the clock is ticking on several young players for the Chicago Bulls, especially with all the young players that they have acquired this past offseason and some of the, additions that they made, via signings or via the draft with Montes Buzelis. Now, when Joe Cowley honed in into these young players, he had and gave his reasons why these players, it's now or never for these guys on the Chicago Bulls. And I kind of agree with him. Out of all the things that Joe Cowley pretty much talks about, I don't necessarily agree with most of them. But when a guy's right, you got to give him kudos and say he's right. I do believe that it is now or never time for these two guys. And Joe Cowley's reason for Dalen Terry, we're going to start with that one. He pretty much said, if the outside shot is fixed and the game has slowed down for Dalen Terry, he has a chance to stick. Big ifs, however. And I think that's fair. I think right now during Dalen Terry's tenure with the Chicago Bulls has been a bit underwhelming. It's been a bit disappointing. And there is a lot of conversations on what the Bulls should have actually done when that draft pick came up and they did select Dalen Terry. Walker Kessler was one of those guys that me and C-Dub was high on around that time when the Chicago Bulls was doing their thing in their respective draft, and the Bulls elected to go with Dalen Terry. It was somebody, honestly, I didn't even see coming, but he was here. And during his tenure with the Chicago Bulls, it's been a bit underwhelming. You've seen him receive during his rookie year the lowest amount of playing time out of all the rookies within his respective class. You've seen in those moments opportunities, it seemed that he was a bit erratic, so erratic to the point that Big Kev over here during one of our live calls named him Crash Bandicoot, just simply because it seemed like Dalen Terry wanted everything so fast. But when we talk about that negative stuff, we do come to the point to where we got to show Dalen Terry some love for how he ended this past season. The way that he ended this past season, you know what I'm saying? And if you just go look at the stats won't tell the whole story, because it's going to look up and say, hey, the man only averaged 3 points. Bobby, what the hell are you talking about? But I encourage you to go ahead and look at the second half of last season and see how dialed in Dalen Terry was. And it still didn't come at crazy scoring outputs. It came as this young player can give you a little bit of everything. He can go ahead and attack the basket. We see that he's trying to work on a three-point shot. Hopefully he can go ahead and improve that, because in that regard, last season, he didn't do well from the three-point line. This guy actually averaged 23% from the three-point line, which is terrible. But we did say that, hey, at least he's taking the jump shots at that particular moment. We say on the defensive side, he was holding his own. He was getting in there, getting down and dirty with those other big guys down in the paint, going to get rebounds, assisting the ball. He was doing a little bit of everything, and the game actually looked and appeared as if it slowed down for Dalen Terry. So I would say we would like to see Dalen Terry continually improve. We would love to see Dalen Terry take that next step forward. We would love to see Dalen Terry become an integral part of what the Chicago Bulls are trying to build with this youth movement. Now, if Dalen Terry doesn't perform, it hurts the whole cause. Well, not the entire cause, but it hurts an aspect of the pie that the Bulls are trying to put together to establish themselves for years to come. But if Dalen Terry settles in, if Dalen Terry settles in, if Dalen Terry gets his head right, if Dalen Terry settles in from the 3-point line, let's just say the sake of this for discussion that this past season, after averaging 23%, that Dalen Terry can get to 33%. That's a 10-point percentage increase for that young player. And that will leave me to believe that he can only get better because he still is a young player. He still is only 21 years of age right now, heading on into 22. So he still has some time to improve. But if he's able to somehow get closer and closer to league average, especially this year, which I believe is probably one of the most important seasons of his career, if he can have a major improvement, that can help him in his stock. And it will also help the Chicago Bulls. But there is a problem with that. Playing time. We will touch on that a little bit later. But now I want to talk about Julian Phillips. Joe Cowley, when he talked about Julian Phillips, he went on and said, the foot injury was a setback, but it's time for Phillips to show that he's more than just a slash and dunk guy. And I agree with that statement left on by Joe Cowley. I believe that the Chicago Bulls, if you are trying to build a championship caliber team, yes, you want to have your cutters and your slashers, but some of those cutters and your slashers got to be able to do a little bit more than just slash and dunk at the basket. Now, one guy that I'm going to bring up, I'm not saying that Julian Phillips is this guy, but I just want to paint the example. The example goes to Alex Caruso. And the reason I'm looking at Alex Caruso is because Alex Caruso does a lot of different things. One of the things that he does is he defends well and he's able to slash and make plays at the basket. Probably not dunk them all the time, but he was one of those high IQ guys that was able to visually see what was going on if a team presented the Chicago Bulls with the zone, which teams played a lot of zone versus the defense. Alex Caruso was able in that moment to slash to the basket. But there were times to where those slashes or those dives weren't there or just not effective. And Alex Caruso can still pull up and hit a three. Alex Caruso can still go back to the top of the key, grab the ball, and initiate some type of offense. That's what we're pretty much looking for when we talk about Julian Phillips. You don't have to be Alex Caruso. But what I'm saying is that outside of slashing and dunking to the basket, bring something else forward that can help strengthen your case on why you deserve playing time for the Chicago Bulls. Are you going to be one of those guys that's a defensive stopper? Are you going to be a guy that's going to impact rebounding? Can you stand in that corner and hit those corner threes? Those are going to be some of the things that Julian Phillips is going to have to add to his repertoire or game to see valuable minutes. Now, what does this mean for both Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry? With the limited amount of time that these players have leading up into training camp and then getting through training camp and then fighting for minutes with so many young players on this squad, so many guards in certain areas to try to plug and pull to see who's more valuable or who can give us the best chance of win. These guys' window is is not open much. It's not open much. So these two players have to take full advantage of what's the opportunity right in front of them. They know Billy Donovan as the coach. They've hooped with certain players who's going to be integral parts of the offense and defense. So these guys have to come in, Don't do too much. Just be yourself, but show that you've improved and be a solid role player within yourself well enough to grab the attention of your coaches to the point to where they can trust you and you can earn yourself some minutes, young fellas. That's what it really comes down to. And I think that the reason why it is now or never time for them is because the Bulls are continually moving on from what it seems like this from the last offseason. You know what I'm saying? This past offseason that we just went through. It seems like they have the mindset to now let's push forward. You know what I mean? And with the additions of Chris Duarte, with the additions of Jalen Smith, with the veterans in Javon Carter and Torrey Craig, and with all the training camp players that came aboard in Kenny Lofton Jr., EJ Liddell, THT, guys like that, they're fighting for your spots. There's only going to be so many people who has a guaranteed spot. And right now, the only people that got the guaranteed spot, we can probably count Vooch, Zach, Kobe, Ayo, P. Will, Montes Buzelis, Jalen Smith, probably. And then after that, the other guys are fighting for the last 8 spots. That's how I'm looking at it. You might give Dalen Terry, you know what I'm saying? It's not to say that Dalen Terry is not going to make it through training camp and not make it through the season. But if you have some type of foresight, you have to look forward to see how these guys can affect your team moving forward. So they got to step up. They have to show that they can add more to their game that can then affect how the Chicago Bulls want to play. And three-point shooting is going to be one of the key factors for both of these young players. Let me know how y'all feeling about that. Is it now or never time for Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry with the Chicago Bulls? Let me know why or why not down below. Now, before we get up out of here, I want to touch on one of the recent polls that came out from CBS Sports that ranked the top head coaches, that ranked all head coaches within the NBA going 1 through 30, and even placed some of these guys in tiers with the title to the tier. Now, you may ask yourself what Billy Donovan came in at. I'm just going to let you know right now, he came in towards the bottom of the list. Billy Donovan failed within tier 8. Billy Donovan fell within tier 8 of NBA coaching rankings that pretty much what they titled as I wouldn't be enthused. Along with Billy Donovan at 24, you have Chauncey Billups at 25, JB Bickerstaff at 23, and Doc Rivers at 22. And if we keeping it a buck, he's placed well. I'm not going to sit here and debate and say he should be ahead of JB Bickerstaff because the last time I seen JB Bickerstaff, he was in the playoffs. I ain't going to go against and argue for a case over Doc Rivers. I know the history with Doc Rivers, but Doc Rivers had more success than Billy Donovan. He was in the playoffs last season. So I'm not arguing for Billy Donovan to get out of this tier because, to be quite frank with you, the title matches up with exactly how Bulls Nation feels about Billy Donovan. We are not enthused, so I wouldn't be enthused. I wouldn't. I would not be enthused about what Billy Donovan is going into this season. Do I believe these young players can perform pretty well? I do, but I don't have 100% trust in Billy Donovan to right the ship and lead the next era of the Chicago Bulls based on the last 4 years that he's been here. I don't have that trust within him. So he's ranked rightfully so. There is not many coaches that he's better than, at least in my mind. I'm not even going to lie with you. I would have been quite surprised to see Billy Donovan closer to the middle of the pack. Not even going to front you. But this is where we are with our head coach. You know what I'm saying? We don't know if the seat is getting hot. We can say that we believe it will, but we quite frankly just don't know because What happened a few seasons ago? We're going to give him an extension. We ain't even going to let y'all know all the details until about after the season. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm looking for, though, is I hope that Billy Donovan pulls his head out of his backside. A light bulb goes off in his mind. He really showed what he can do as a coach, especially with the addition of Josh Giddey, giving him a point guard that can help operate and hopefully be competent on the court. He has Josh Giddey. Lonzo Ball was his guy, but Lonzo Ball has been out with injuries for the last 2 seasons. Insert Josh Giddey. Hopefully he's the guy to be the point guard to right the ship for Billy Donovan. And hopefully we can see Billy Donovan creep up into tier 4 perhaps, to where it makes more sense, to where you might not have the best coach in the NBA, but you got on what they called for the rankings, the tier of obvious floor raisers. That's in the tier with Mike Brown, Chris Finch, Joe Mazzulla, Tom Thibodeau, Mike Budenholzer, and Ime Udoka. Mike Budenholzer, I'm not too concerned on, but that ain't the video for this. This ain't the video. But I will say, if this young Chicago Bulls get a obvious floor raiser, they will well exceed the expectation of 30 wins. And what I mean by well exceed, I'm just saying at least by 6 games, the Chicago Bulls will clear that record. Clear that expectation, excuse me. If Billy Donovan really like that and is a obvious floor raiser, the Chicago Bulls will be right there in the thick of things fighting for the 8th seed. Or better yet, since people got them saying 30 games, they'll be in the mix for the play-in. And they will see a play-in game. That's a floor raiser, at least with working with this young talent. If Billy Donovan can exceed that, I say he's a floor raiser. But it comes down to if Billy Donovan can actually show us. Could he actually show us? Who knows? Who knows? It'd be great to have an elite coach, wouldn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Just before we go, just to mention that in tier 2, the elites is how they title that one. That consists of Ty Lue, Steve Kerr, Rick Carlisle, and Nick Nurse. Not too mad at the list. Don't really care because my coach is down at the bottom, sitting with a bunch of other guys in the tier that I won't be enthused. I wouldn't be enthused. That's where Billy Donovan is at. But hey, we shall see what it turns out to. We got a couple more weeks before training camp get the rolling out. I'm excited about that. Not feeling too good about my Chicago Bears right now after the week 2 beat down by the offensive line. I know the score tells a different story, but the beat down of my Chicago Bears offensive line, whoo, buddy. But it is what it is. We shall bounce back, and we hope that Chicago Bulls bring us great laughs and great dubs this season, because I believe it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But that is it for me today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to another episode. Make sure on your way out, you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. If you want to call in to be a part of our mailbag episodes, call in, state your name, leave your take on anything Chicago Bulls. 773-242-9219 is the number. Thank y'all very much. Always see red. Y'all already know. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure.
Cognac.